We're now up to Geoff Irwin from Animal Management Gold Coast City Council to talk about the Queensland Government pilot project that Gold Coast City Council has been doing. Okay.
Good morning. As Joyce said, my name is Geoff Irwin, Gold Coast City Council, probably representing the dark side of this process as a legislator. So I'll just go through what we've done in this city in regard to the pilot project we commenced for animal breeders. I think it's the breeding project is probably, you could see after all the discussion we've had this week, is just one of the strategies I think that may assist. We've seen strategies around education, the compulsory desexing or desexing, promotion of desexing, and the better management in refuges, but I think somehow you've got to probably try and turn the tap off a little bit. So this may be an opportunity, we think, for that. What does the, as you can see, there's a bit of a history leading up to this and some discussion to get to that point, and some, gratefully, some funding from the government, which was unusual. The permit involves all breeders. We're talking about people who may be a backyard breeder, or if you intend to have a kennel or a cattery, you still have to have a breeder permit. And there's a distinction there that I want to probably talk about a little bit later because of the issues around town planning considerations, which has been one of the big problems in developing this process. There's minimum standards, and of course they affect not only the people who have about the welfare of the animals, that the minimum standards also about the community, and that people often don't want to live next to people who have got a stack of animals or too many that they can't control. It's brought in a concept of identification, compulsory microchipping, and it's also deals with cats. And I will apologise, this presentation is a bit cat-centric because it was used to talk with our cat breeders at the time. So it talks about cats, but it does affect the same rules apply to dog breeders as well. The process, I've gone past one, Joy, have I? Yeah. We talked about all breeders. The process is pretty simple. Just apply for your permit. The officers will arrange an inspection, and then, of course, once it's approved, we'll issue you a permit. I think at this point it's probably relevant to point out that councils are... Everyone's talked this week about money. I've heard money talked in nearly every presentation so far, and councils are not any different. We have to look at the bottom line. We have to try and get the best bang for our buck with our resources. So having a permit means that we've got to spend some resources on getting to that approval process. So we had to set a fee. It was a bit unpopular, and but the fee, we did our best to try and make it as easy as we could. It's a 3-year fee based on what we believe is the cost to get an officer out there, do the assessment, process all the applications and everything. And we discussed things like perhaps making the breeders a gold breeder where we would charge another fee. But at this stage, we're going to go with a 3-year permit, and just then we can go back and reassess how things are going. And if we need to flesh that out, we can. If we need to change the fee, well, we can. It might go to 5 years. It's not locked in stone. But it still is based on our user pay system. And there's issues around that, some legal issues as well. The breeders, as you can see there, the numbers became a real issue. This is where the town planning, as I mentioned before, was a problem, because you can't create a local law that contradicts another piece of legislation. Around the state, in Queensland, most councils have adopted a planning regime which allows people to keep up to 9 animals without becoming regarded as a kennel or a cattery. So up to 9 was the limit for a long time. Gold Coast went back a few years ago and brought that down to 4. Now that wasn't done too wisely, but it meant this affected this process. So when we were trying to allow people to be a registered breeder and carry out their activity, and a lot of them were not even known to us, so there was a problem in that we didn't want to be too restrictive and stop them from doing what they've already done, which hasn't really had any adverse effect. So we wanted to make sure we could accommodate that, but we had to work within the legislation that existed. We don't have Mike up here. He's in Victoria. When he finishes there, he can probably come up and fix Queensland legislation. So the limit of 4 was difficult. It didn't suit all breeders. To accommodate that, we have been able to, through a process, flesh that out to 8, given that we had another regime where we allowed people to have 4 animals, which is our limit on what you can keep on your property without going to through a permit system. So that allowed us to accommodate some people up to 8. It still doesn't suit everyone, and that's the problem with this. I don't think we can come up with a legislation guideline that suits everyone, and that was a learning curve for us too. We were really amazed once we got into this, started peeling this onion, that there's so many different types of breeders. We have one instance, and it's not so singular, where a chap wants a breeding permit. All his animals that he breeds with are probably outside the city, interstate. He brings them in when they're due, when they come on heat or whatever, and they're ready that cycle to breed. He'll bring some of those animals back, breed with them, then dispose of the litters, give the animals back to those owners. And even some of those guys live in the city. I think one guy had 12 animals that were his, as far as he was concerned, but he had them subleased to other owners. And they were quite happy too, because they had a pedigree dog that, went away and had a litter and came back. So it was interesting, and they didn't have to pay for it, of course. There was others. The cat breeding is something that really is astounding, and I think some of you people would know more about that. But the issues around cat breeding were interesting, and the numbers again. The people want to have quite a number of cats, and I think one of the analogies was that a good stud cat needs at least 4 queens, which should apply to us too. The learning curve went on. There's probably no current problems. The breeder code of practice we developed, I've got copies of it here, and I'll leave them outside later at lunch if anyone wants one. Help yourself. If you don't get one and you want one, just let me know and I'll get it to you. The approved breeder form is just that, but the main issue that we feel is important is that we have a breeder number, and that was a very crucial part of the whole process. The breeder number then is expected to be placed on any advertisements that are in the paper, but the problem with this is that this is a Gold Coast City Council local law. It's not a state law, it's not a local law in any other shire, and anyone who has animals, and we're on the border with New South Wales, puppy farmers could be down there, they can send their animals up here, they can sell them in the paper, we have no control over that. We can't control the papers by saying you must only advertise people who have a breeder number. We don't have that capacity. But we can expect anyone in this city who has a breeder permit to advertise with their number. And what we're hoping to do is by not compliance as much as community standards, is that people would start to realise that, look, if you want to get a good animal that's been bred correctly, that's been brought up correctly, that's had everything done in its best interest on its way to being put up for sale, then look at a breeder that has a number and look at a breeder that's got a recognised number. Now, there have been some other councils already picked up the breeder permit regime, and they've had quite a bit of success, and they've had a lot more permits issued than we have, and we're a bit envious of that. But the problem with that was our town planning regime being different to some of the other councils, and we had to really work around that as best we could. So the numbers are a crucial part of this. Are you going to talk on this, Joy?
No, you're right.
Okay. All right. So we ran quite a number of information sessions. As I said, this one was geared up for the cat breeders, and There's the dog. Yeah. So we went through that. We went through that process, and it was difficult because again, everyone has their own little axe to grind, and have their own interests, their particular interests that we wanted to try and accommodate. I think to date, unfortunately, we've only had probably a 10 to 20% uptake, which is fairly poor. But it was an interesting, through these sessions, was that there was a lot of mistrust by the breeders. They were very sceptical about what was council's real method, you know. It obviously wasn't to make money, because we showed them that. It wasn't to create work for ourselves, because we don't really want it, but it was about the numbers. And look, we have a desire to reach the outcomes that all of you guys want too, and that is having good animals in the community, animals that are bred correctly and brought up correctly. There's a lot of horrific stories around the puppy farms and some of the breeders that don't really know their craft, and they've done some really horrible things. So we're hoping that we can overcome that. And so look, I've gone through this quickly because I knew you were always having trouble with time, Joy. So there's not a lot more to be said, except that if anyone is going to promote the breeder permits, and I know they exist already around in certain levels of legislation throughout the country, but you need to have a fairly good political will. You need to have engagement, because it's difficult. And there's a lot of, and as I said, it's astounding the amount of mistrust within those industries of cat and dog breeders about their business. They don't want other people to know, and we've already had a complaint about that, where they didn't want us taking pictures when we go into their kennel or whatever they've set up as their kennel or whelping areas, because they were worried about where the picture's going and who's seeing them and who's going to get access to what I'm doing, and maybe different to what someone else is doing, better or smarter or whatever. So there was a lot of that type of thing for us to overcome. But we're working on that, and hopefully we'll get through it. Oh, sorry. So those breeder codes will be outside if you need them.